The Dune Prophecy finale, much like the rest of the show, was pretty uninteresting. Parts of it felt like stuff just happened. And the way that it ended felt like it should have been the end of like episode 2 or 3 as kind of the halfway point of the season. Because now there's actually interesting things to explore. And instead, it's a lot of just open-ended implied threads. Because the show meandered so much, the payoffs didn't particularly feel interesting or warranted in some cases. They weren't super satisfying because you don't really care about any of the characters at this point. The whole show has felt really sterile, and they still managed to mix in some dumb stuff in between. So overall, the show was probably mediocre at best, incredibly boring. So let's get into episode 6, which is the season finale. So to start off, we see that Tula and a couple of the other Bene Gesserit saw when Valia made Dorothea kill herself in the beginning of the season. They're trying to do a thing where they want the organization to be overthrown by the other faction because the whole thing was built on lies. The execution of it I thought was really dull, and we don't really get anything from these flashback scenes that hasn't been very thoroughly implied throughout the entire season. Like, we knew that Valia killed her, we knew that she lied about what happened, and we knew that's what the organization was built off of. They do add more into it to make it darker in this finale, but even then, the way that it gets resolved is so open-ended that it doesn't even feel like a payoff. It's kind of like when you go out to one of those small plate restaurants or a fancy restaurant and you order a meal and it sounds really good and the pictures it looks really good. And then when they bring it out on a plate, it's like one bite and you're kind of like, well, where's the rest of it? Except this show isn't the equivalent of a fancy restaurant. It's more like a Chili's. Continuing on, we see that Tula told Valia she was pregnant. We find out through the episode that she lied about having a miscarriage to Valia because she didn't want Valia using her son as a tool. Again, that's all stuff that we could gather on our own from the rest of the show. So these flashbacks really don't seem to add much to me. And that's been a problem with the entire season. So Tula's figured out that this thing that Desmond is using is a virus. And it's some kind of nanotechnology machine virus. But they also said it was airborne. It doesn't really make any sense to me. They kind of just try to justify it by saying it's a bioweapon, as if that just explains everything. But even then, you still have to explain how he can infect people pretty much at will, how he can activate it when he does. And then we find out that once people are afraid, that's what triggers the virus, which I don't even think makes any sense because we see him do it to people who aren't afraid of him throughout the season. Or like Kasha early on, it just kind of randomly happens to because she has a bad dream. So the whole thing really makes no fucking sense to me. So this chick specializes in transmutation, which is where they cleanse their body of poisons and kind of turn them into their own blood and make them not poisonous. And obviously she tries to do it. The virus adapts and kills her. And it turns out that this virus is some kind of super duper virus. And this scene is really just to set up this bullshit ending where she says that the more she fights, the more the virus adapts and gets malicious or whatever. And this is all just to set up, I would call horseshit at the end of this episode, where Desmond goes to use it on Valia. Tula says, don't fight it. And somehow Valia is the only person the whole season to survive because she's just fucking awesome, I guess. The same way that she created the voice out of nothing, just instinctually did it. I mean, give me a fucking break. We see Desmond interrogating Kieran and asking him how long that the rebellion was working with the Sisterhood, because he wants some kind of evidence to make the Empire cut ties with them completely. And Kieran says, fuck off. The princess tries to free Kieran. Natalia catches her and has her arrested. And I'll just go ahead and say, Inez is probably the worst actor in the show. She just looks like she is struggling to express any kind of emotion every time she's on screen. This is a perfect example of something that could be really interesting if we gave a shit about any of these characters and their relationship. But their relationship throughout the season has pretty much been, hey, you need to get engaged to this little boy. We're going to let you go off to be a Bene Gesserit. She's mad they're working with Desmond. But there's just not really much there that's interesting character-wise to make the idea feel well executed and fulfilling. Javico is banging Francesca, and he wants to send his wife on a tour to be a diplomat with all the great houses so that he can just hang out with his mistress. With Inez getting arrested, Valia says that Javico needs to die. And I'll be honest, none of this really makes any sense to me. Like, they could have killed Javico at any time. She's been trying to manipulate him all season so that she can have time with Inez to brainwash her into being a full-on cultist and then get her on the throne. But now she's willing just to kill Javico and run away with Inez to Arrakis. And Francesca doesn't want to do it because she actually cares about Javico as the father of her son. I don't know how the Bene Gesserit ever came into fucking power. It seems like all this show has them doing is bitching at each other and whining, and then half of them don't even seem that dedicated. But either way, there's that little bit of interpersonal drama there with this character that literally got introduced in the penultimate episode, and her job is just honeypot. Valia is okay in this flashback using the AI as their breeding program knowledge, and it kind of hints here about the idea of a Harkonnen Atreides kid being really useful, and that's part of why Tula gets rid of Desmond. But again, we could have inferred all that without these flashbacks. It's completely obvious what her motivation is. And this episode really reinforces the point that I've been making all season, that the entire motivation for the Bene Gesserit to get Inez to become a sister and then put her on the throne is really irrelevant and unnecessary because of the vast amount of influence and power they already have. So we see here that they're planning out for Javico's dad to get the throne, for it to go to Javico, for him to marry Natalia. It's very obvious that they are the ones who set all this up. They're essentially running the entire Imperium on their own anyway. What difference does it make if Inez becomes a Bene Gesserit and then gets on the throne? They have sisters in every fucking great house. They're making huge decisions politically. They're in the Emperor's ear and in his bed. Like, they are having them run everything, but also saying that they need to get the princess as a sister. It just seems completely pointless and irrelevant, and that's the motivating factor for this entire fucking season. Tula consults with the AI about this super virus that Desmond has, and this is where she thinks it's like nanotechnology. And we don't ever even actually get a fucking answer for that, by the way. They just allude to this. Valia has a vision and says that someone put the virus in Desmond. That's it. I mean, the show is getting a season 2. The way that this is written, it seems like that was planned from the beginning. But man, what an unfulfilling season 1 when you essentially did what feels like half a book or half a story. So Lila, possessed by Dorothea, who I still think this is a massive world building fucking issue, that these women can just take over bodies when they're dead and seemingly for however long they want. And in a super obvious fucking trick, Lila's like, oh, can you loosen the restraints a little bit? And then stabs Jen as soon as she does it. It was the most transparent thing in the fucking world. Just makes her seem like a fucking idiot. And she's been the most cynical character the entire season and questioning everything. So, yeah, let's just make her retarded because it's convenient. Javico is pissed off about his daughter being imprisoned, obviously. And Desmond's like, that's between you and your wife. And then calls him out for his bullshit about wanting to use Natalia as a diplomat, when the reality is obviously that he just wants to hang out with Francesca. Dorothea comes and she's talking to all the acolytes who want to restore the sisterhood, more to her vision than Valia's. And this whole plot line I found really fucking dumb and really cringy. We see Jen stuck in Lila's place and she pulls her hands through the restraints, dislocating her thumbs, and then pops them back into place. Dorothea is looking for evidence to prove that Valia built the sisterhood on bullshit. Obviously, it's all been destroyed. No surprise there. But don't worry, she was smart enough to delete all of the digital stuff and all the technological stuff, any kind of records. But big piles of fucking bones, she'll just leave those around. So their plan is to use Theodosia as a double, have her replace Inez to buy some time for them to escape, and Valia to intentionally get arrested so that she has access to her. Desmond sides with Natalia, no surprise there. And now Javico can't make her go be a diplomat. He has no power again. For some reason, Desmond is literally the only resource that he has. He doesn't have any other useful soldiers or advisors or a gun just to put a fucking bullet in his head. So now he's the bitch again. So in a super transparent attempt to get arrested, she just goes and insults Javico to his face and tells him he's always been a puppet and that they controlled everything. And he gets pissed off and has her arrested, which is what she wanted, and it's really obvious because he's an idiot. But also, this is all stuff that he already knew. And even though it wasn't well executed, that's been something he's supposed to have been struggling with all season, was feeling like he has no power, feeling like he's always being manipulated by others, feeling helpless in the deal that he was initially going to make with the Ricazes. So I don't even know why this would upset him when it's all shit that's true and he's acknowledged himself. So Dorothea wants to expose the Harkonnens' lies, and she goes and flushes all the water out of this pool thing they have in this big empty room. We get another flashback. And there's the rebellion faction that wants to overthrow Valia because they think that she killed Dorothea, which obviously she did. And Valia has taught the voice to her 3 other friends. So they go and yell at all these girls, choose, as in choose to side with Valia or kill themselves. So they just yell choose over and over and they all kill themselves. It's kind of brutal, kind of don't care. And I prefer when the voice had to be much more specific because it feels like this show kind of plays loose with the instructions to where they can literally just yell choose at all these girls and they kill themselves. Again, all stuff that has been pretty heavily implied in the present timeline, and it's not some super interesting action scene. They literally just tell them all to kill themselves, and they do. Francesca goes and just reveals Valia's plan to have her kill Javico. He says, stop lying to me. He doesn't believe her, and he wants to attack her, but she's like, the imprint won't let you. Valia goes and does her prison break. Inez insists that they take Kieran also. So Kieran, Valia, and Inez leave, and Theodosia stays behind. She's supposed to stay there as the princess. As soon as Desmond finds out about Valia being there, he's like, lock down the whole fortress. And we need to go to the prison cells, obviously, because he figures out right away that everything she was doing was intentional. I don't know why he's the only not retard. So instead of just staying as the princess, Theodosia pretends to be a wounded guard and then stabs Desmond, but doesn't kill him. So it just kind of messes him up. And then she gets arrested. Really kind of a waste to me. She might have been stuck there anyway, but if she had stayed as the princess, at least it would have bought him time. Or if she had just faked dead as a soldier, she might have escaped. Javico gets pissed off and says that he's never had any freedom, and he kills himself. I thought this was really fucking stupid. I understand that it's supposed to be him taking control of his life for the first time, but him just being okay with killing himself suddenly really feels like it came out of nowhere. Again, especially when he's already acknowledged that he's been pretty much a puppet his entire life anyway, that he's suddenly now so triggered he has to kill himself. I just don't think it really makes any fucking sense. It doesn't feel earned. It's not very satisfying. I just think the whole thing is really lame and kind of an attempt to be shocking. We see Kieran get to the ship, and he's supposed to fly away with Inez and Valia. Natalia sees Javico wounded and Francesca over his body, so she grabs the poison needle and stabs Francesca in the neck, and then goes and yells that the Emperor is dead, obviously trying to frame Francesca for killing Javico and to get rid of a rival and take power for herself. I actually don't mind this scene, other than the fact that it kind of felt like some sort of wannabe Shakespearean drama. But character-wise, it's fine at least. And like I said, Valia was smart enough to get rid of all the data and records, manipulate the whole history, but then just threw all the bones into the pool. They literally live next to a cliff, and she kept the bones in the pool in their school or facility or whatever you want to call it. Just fucking retarded and lazy. And Dorothea uses this to try to overthrow her and take the school back and the Bene Gesserit. And Dorothea, taking over Lila, gives this supposed to be impassioned speech. I found it really cringe. I don't think the actress has the charisma or the presence to pull it off. And for some reason, the old bitch gave her the crowbar to hold while she gave it. Don't really know what that's fucking about. This whole thing I just thought was miserable to watch. And they go and destroy the AI and want to get the school back to its roots as she sees it. Tula's going to go get Desmond in the present timeline and try to get him to stop being a weapon. And in the past timeline, we see where she lied to her sister so that her sister wouldn't try to use Desmond for her political shit. We see the Harkonnen boy find a recording of this shit with Valia, and he smiles. Pretty sure we don't see him again. Valia tells Kieran to take Inez and says that she owes him one for saving his life, and she's going to stay behind to deal with Desmond and his men. Luckily, he only brings like 3 fucking dudes, so she can just deal with them all with the voice and be done with it. And then she tells him to try to use his power on her. And he does. I hate this next part so much. Kieran and Inez fight like a dozen Sardaukar by themselves, and she's just fucking them up. And it's like, great, this little princess who's trained but never actually fought is just beating ass of the supposedly elite guard of the Empire. I mean, Kieran at least is supposed to be a prolific swordsman, but even then, the way they're outnumbered and encircled, not really sure how much sense it makes. Tula tells Valia to just not resist, and magically she's fine. Makes no fucking sense. Whatever. So we see some robot putting the virus into Desmond's eye and getting no fucking answers this season because this is all just set up for a season 2. This entire season has felt like meandering setups for more interesting things, but we're not going to get any of those anytime soon. Tula uses the voice on Valia to not let her kill Desmond, and then says that he's her son, which we already knew, and that she lied because her sister and her are both power-hungry crazy people, again, which we already knew. So really just kind of getting exposition that we didn't need. But Tula and Desmond hug, and then he has her arrested. No surprise there. He's already said throughout the season he didn't give a shit who his mom was, just that he thought it was one of the witches who abandoned him. Valia, Inez, and Kieran get to Arrakis, and that's it. So this entire season stretched out half a fucking story into like 6.5 hours. You can see almost nothing was concluded at the end. Clearly they knew they were getting a season 2 before the season started. They've already announced the renewal. But to me, this is just a colossal failure of a way to tell a story. If you want to have multiple seasons of a show, the current season still needs to have an arc of its own, beginning, middle, and end with some kind of conclusions and payoffs and some open threads. This season felt like 6 episodes of setup, and all we're left with is open threads. And they're open threads for characters that I don't give a fuck about. Not a huge surprise that they couldn't wrap everything up. They had no intention to. Maybe season 2 will be more interesting. I'm not super optimistic, especially if the pacing matches this season, where it feels like everything was really stretched out and really dragged out. A lot of repetition from the flashbacks, a lot of repetition in the conversations. Nothing super deep, just kind of bouncing around a lot to make it feel like shit's happening. And then they throw in some titties once in a while. So yeah, very disappointing. I don't really have much else to say about it because it's a finale with no conclusions. We get no answers, just more questions. It almost feels like mystery box bullshit, like the TV show From. The only difference here is they have source material, so presumably they know where they're actually going. But I feel like if this is all based on one book, it should have been one season. To me, whatever they're going to do in season 2 should have happened in season 1. If this story had been told more tightly, I think they easily could have fit these 6 episodes into probably 3, maybe 4. And you just do one season of 8 episodes or 10 episodes and tell your whole story instead of calling it a season when really it's like season part 1A. And then you want to have season 1 part B, probably not even come out for like 3 fucking years or something. So yeah, I'm really disappointed with this show. Not really a fan of a lot of the execution. Kind of a downer. I like the Dune universe, but this story was just dull, uncompelling, dumb many times. Just not very good. I'm going to leave it there for this one. If you've seen this show, let me know what you think. I try to respond to all the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.